Let me go first since I do have to leave early. And I'm going to talk a little bit about theology of the body just for 5 or 10 minutes. It's a very difficult subject to boil down into 5 or 10 minutes because there are volumes written about theology of the body. It's very appropriate we speak about it at the same time that we talk about marriage because theology of the body is making a huge impact on how we understand marriage in the Catholic Church today. So it's something important for Catholics to learn more about, and there's lots of Catholics who still never really heard about it or don't know much about it. I want to just show of hands who has heard, especially the candidates and catechumens. Have you ever heard that phrase before, theology of the body? Yeah, you have, yeah. So some people have, but some people still really haven't heard that before. But now that you know, when you hear something and then you start hearing it all over the place, you'll probably hear it more now. Pope John Paul II devoted his first major teaching of his pontificate to what he called the theology of the body. Over a 5-year period during his Wednesday audiences in Rome, he gave 129 lectures, and as a body of teaching, those were called theology of the body. And he based these teachings on Scripture, mainly the Gospels, St. Paul's writings, and the book of Genesis. And he looked in these reflections at 3 main things. Who man was at the very beginning, at creation, who man is now after original sin's effects, and who man is meant to be and will be in the new life to come, in the next world. And he took these reflections and applied them to the vocation of marriage, the vocation of celibacy, and human sexuality in general. His lectures were later compiled into an enormous book called Theology of the Body. It's like this thick and very, very dense. And also they were expounded upon in numerous encyclicals and letters and exhortations. And since then, there have been many theologians who've specialized in this body of teaching and have many books out that are very reader-friendly and really great to read. There's probably one of the better-known authors and theologians in this topic. His name is Christopher West. There's also numerous other experts, and if you ever see books about it, I'd recommend you reading them because it opens up a whole new understanding of human sexuality and marriage. I have a quote here from George Weigel, who's a theologian and writer. He described theology of the body as one of the boldest reconfigurations of Catholic theology in centuries. And he's not the only one who believes that this body of teaching will have dramatic consequences in the 3rd millennium in the Church, and that it will compel a major development of thinking in certain areas. So why is this so significant for the Church and for us personally? It's because theology of the body gives us a new understanding of what it means to be made male and female in God's image, and it gives us a new language with which to communicate about our human nature and our faith and our purpose for being here. So just really briefly on theology of the body, when John Paul II was teaching about it, he based it in Genesis, where we learn that we're made in God's image and likeness, and we see God take the clay and form it and breathe life into it and create Adam. And Adam is body and spirit. But Adam is alone, and he's lonely because he's not an angel, and he is not a mere animal. He is what we would call an embodied soul, and he cannot find someone who is the same as him. So when Eve is fashioned out of Adam's side, and he sees her, he says, "This at last is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh." So we see in that males and females share the same nature. They share human nature. And John Paul II talked about how with the creation of Eve, the possibility now existed for union and communion. He talks those are common words in theology of the body, union and communion. And he says that we are the image and likeness of God, not so much in our solitude, but when we are in communion with other people. And that is because if we're created in God's image and likeness, what is God? God is a Trinity. He is a communion of persons. He is a communion of fruitful and self-giving love. And so we best mirror God when we are also giving ourselves, and we are also in this communion of self-giving love with other people. And so we're called to do this through our bodies, depending on our state of life. So it's very easy for us, when you think about it, to treat our bodies in negative ways. We may think of our bodies, and we don't think too much about this, but a lot of us think of our bodies as bad, as something to repress, punish, or at least just neglect. Or our bodies, certainly we see it in the culture, our bodies are kind of slaves to our bodies, and we should just let our bodies sort of rule the roost and do whatever our bodies lead us, our desires lead us to do. We can also have a tendency, and I think a lot of people with faith can have this, to see ourselves as just, these are just shells. We're really souls, and we're trapped in these shells of bodies. And these are really annoying things, these bodies. If we can just escape them, we'd be a lot better off. However, as much as we wish this were so, because our bodies can really let us down in a lot of ways, it's not the case. We are embodied souls. We are body and spirit. And although our bodies, just like our whole self, have been corrupted by sin, by original sin and our own sin, they will be resurrected at the end, and we will be whole again, body and soul. And it is through our bodies on earth that we are working out our salvation, so to speak, that we are learning to love and be loved and become like Christ and grow closer to God. We do that through our bodies, because this is how we live. So the central point with theology of the body is that your body and what you do with it is meant to be a sign of who God is. And theology of the body is ultimately a teaching that develops the sacramentality of the body. That the body is sacramental. So what does this mean for our everyday lives as Christians, as Catholics? First thing it means we're called to take care of our bodies, to treat them well, to adorn them in a dignified way, and to treat the bodies of others with respect. It means that our bodies also speak a language. It's not enough just to speak words. Our bodies speak a language. And it's one of the reasons why the church teaches that sexual union belongs in marriage. Because when you give your whole self over, everything you have bodily, it should be in line with what you're also saying with your words and what you're saying with your mind and your heart. That you're giving your whole self over to someone, a complete exchange of persons. So your body should always be speaking in line with what is true about your relationship with someone. And there's whole books written on that whole kind of subject. It's very, very interesting and really has us look at sexuality in a whole different kind of way, in a very holistic kind of relational way. That's really quite beautiful. It also means that we mirror God best when we're in communion with other people. And marriage is only one form of this. It's a distinct union with specific purposes, but we're called to be in communion with all our friends, our family members, the people we serve, all of our brothers and sisters. And we do this in many different ways in our service to them. So people call theology of the body a new sexual revolution. It sort of is of sorts. It's going to take many years to unpack it and develop it, and you're going to hear more about it. It's impacting a lot of people's lives. People say, well, what does it have to do with celibacy? There's a lot written about that too. Probably the thing I could say most succinctly is that it actually really elevates celibacy, because it points, the sacrifice of sexual union points us to what all union is really calling us to think about and hope in, which is our union with God, which is the most important union we have, and the union that we're all waiting for at the end of time. So that is basically theology of the body in a nutshell, what it is, why it's important, and some of the aspects of it. And I welcome